Hey guys, welcome to the video, and in this video today I'm going to be showing you how you can take tiny ideas and turn them into big pieces of content using this automated system. It's going to save you so many hours with your content production, but the kicker here is that we're also going to be using OpenAI assistants, so kind of like mini AI agents that can help us with producing each piece of content. And we have an assistant for each type of content, so they're going to be specialized on each piece of content. But also as well, we have a content review agent that sits at the end of the process. And what that agent is going to do is kind of like a mini person, really. What that person is going to do is they're going to review the content that the system outputs in the end. They're going to rank it, they're going to provide feedback, and then if we decide that we then publish a piece of content because it is good enough, it passes our threshold, once we've published a piece of content, we're going to feed that content automatically, also completely automated, back into the content review agent so that that agent has more robust data to continually refer to in the future and refine their review process, so that over time the access that agent has to like good pieces of content to check against improves, so that the output continually improves over time, which is what we want. So it's pretty cool stuff. We're going to be using make.com to do our automations today. We're going to be using Airtable to process everything and store all of the data. We're obviously going to be using OpenAI's assistants. One thing that I've put together for you guys, if you do want this, if you want to follow along and you want to install this for yourself and customize it, if you can come to samwill.co/templates, and you can download the templates here, drop your details in, and I will send you an email with the make.com template, so the scenario templates, and also the Airtable template, so that you can get cracking, follow this video, and you can get it set up for yourself. So with that being said, let's jump in and let's start the process. All right, so first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to come to airtable.com and we are going to sign up if you don't already have an account. And then once you hit your dashboard, if you click create in the bottom left here, and let's click start from scratch, and we're going to create our new database. So I'm just going to put this as a light green. Let's just call this content machine YouTube. So let's just jump back to our plan here, right? And let's just quickly review this. So the first thing that we want to understand is that for any content automation system like this, and there's many out there, the basics are that we're going to start with inputs. So that's input from us, whether that's in the form of an idea or an audio note or maybe a video. That input needs to get stored in a database. Then we need to be able to process that input. So whatever that content was, we need to be able to process it. So we have a few processes that we're going to run. And then after that process has been run, we then want to have a separate database for the final content. And then we can use that final content from there. So if you look at this, the plan here of what we're going to do is we've got our inputs. So this is our manual inputs from us. Then we have our database here, which is going to store these inputs. Now there's a piece here which is creating a summary and a brief, which I'll come on to as we go through the process. Then we've got our processes. So we're going to take this, one of these content inputs, and then we're going to create a newsletter from it. We're going to create a blog article from it, or maybe we'll create 5 different social posts from it. So different variations from that same idea. Then we're going to store that in this database here. And then our content agent is going to review it. It's going to rank the content here, so it's going to give it a rating. It's also going to provide feedback, and then we do a manual review of the content at the end. And then if we publish it, by publishing it, that means that the piece of content is deemed good enough to then feed back into the content agent, right? So let's start with our Airtable here, and let's get this set up right. So first things first, one thing that we're going to do is we're going to change this to an ID field, because we want to be able to reference an ID for every new piece of content that comes through. So I'm going to edit that field. We've changed the name of it to ID, and then from there we're going to use auto number. So click save, and you can see it's going to add a number to every single new row, every single new piece of content that we add into here. Then I'm going to create a space for copy. So maybe we actually want to, like one of the forms of input that we want to add here is just text, right? So we're just going to type text into here. I'm just going to delete this field and delete this field, and we'll start from scratch, right? So we've got copy, we've got a video, audio, transcription, and summary, right? So we'll have a video field here, and that is going to be set as a file attachment, sorry. So we've got a video attachment. That means we can upload video files into this if we want to. Then we're going to do the same for audio. Then we're going to have transcription. And actually, we're going to make that a long text field. And then we're also going to have a field for a summary here. Summary / brief, I would call this. Now that we have the inputs database set up correctly, let's just rename this table inputs. So we've got copy, video, audio. We could add any three of those into here. And then essentially what we want to do is get a brief, a summary / brief of whatever the idea is from these inputs into this field here. And to do that, sometimes, for example, if it's also video and audio, then we need to transcribe the voice note or the video so that we can then work with the transcription to create the summary as well, right? So this summary column is really important because it's going to grab whatever content we have, and then it's going to create a brief for the next step in the process, which is the processes, all right? So next what we're going to do is we're going to come over to make, and we're going to start to build this out. So you can see in this content engine, I've got a transcribe / audio note. We'll forget that one for now. We've got the summarize input, which is really important, and then we've got the content processing assistance. So we'll come back to the transcribe / audio note later. So summarize input is where we're going to start, right? So let's just go to create a new scenario, and then we're going to summarize inputs for content engine. Now the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to watch Airtable for a new record that is created. So whenever a new piece of, I'm just going to delete these actually just so that we start from clean. Let me just get that done. So whenever we add a new row here, so this is test content. Now that a new row has been created, we want that to be a trigger for our scenario, so for our automation here. So we're going to click Watch Records. I've already got my workspace hooked up to Airtable. If you don't have your Airtable hooked up to Make already, then you click Add and go through the steps there just to connect your Airtable and the correct database. So in here, I'm going to go to base equals content machine YouTube, because that's what we're working with here. So that's the content machine YouTube. So we're going to add that in as the base. The table is going to be our inputs because we want to watch for new rows that are being added to inputs here. And we actually need a created time so that it can actually use the time field to actually trigger this automation. So that's one thing that we forgot to add in. So we're going to go to add a new field, and then if we just type created at, and then we're going to find the field type, not created by, we're going to created time. There we go. So then that's going to actually store the created date and time. All right. So if we go back over to make here, let's do a quick refresh. And now you can see it's got that field that we just created. So we're going to click on that. I'm going to click on OK. And then we're just going to click on choose manually, because what that's going to enable us to do is to pick a row that's just been recently added to test with. So if I click on this, click OK, we're going to run this module only. Now you can see that it's pulling through that information. So it's got our row ID, which is number 4 here, and then it's got the test content and then the created at, right? So we've got test content created at, and then we have the record ID. All right, hope that makes sense. So now we've got our Airtable data into Make. Now what I want to do is I actually want to talk to OpenAI, ChatGPT, to create this summary and brief of whatever the copy is here or the transcription is here. So what we're then going to do is we're going to say OpenAI. We're going to create a completion. Actually, I'm going to use that one. And then, so in our create a chat completion, we're going to select the model 4.0 system, which is one of the latest ones. And then we're going to add a message, and we're going to click the role as user. And then the message content is going to be this, right? So I'm just going to copy paste this in. So we got summarize the following content into 2 paragraphs that can be used in a brief that is being created for the content production team of our automation agency. So this is my personal prompt here. You can tailor this however you want. Make sure this brief highlights the key insights from this content that can be used to structure the final deliverable. Always be sure to write in British English, and then we put content, space. And then we're going to put 2 things in here. We're going to put the copy, because we might have the copy, but we also might use transcription for this as well. It's either going to be one or the other, okay? So I'm going to drop that in, and then let me move myself over that, and then I'm going to click save. I'm going to put max tokens as 0, which means it will use as many as it needs. All right, so now we can test this out, right? So if I come in here and I add an idea, right? So I want to create a high value piece of content around how to increase conversion rates on landing pages for SaaS companies. Oh, I can't spell today or write, it seems. Okay, so now that that has been created in here, now we can go back to Make. We can click on our Airtable. We're going to click choose where to start, choose manually. It's going to call Airtable just to find out what we've got. Now we want number 5 here, which is that latest one that we just added. So that's ID number 5. We're going to click on OK. And then we're going to run this module. Actually, we're going to run once, sorry. And now you can see that the OpenAI is now processing the content, and then we can see what we got out, right? So if we go into output, we go to choices, we've got one option here, we've got the message, we've got the content, and you can see we've got 2 paragraphs here, which is going to help us to brief the next part of the process, which is the processes, right? So the processes that we're going to use in the next step, they're going to ingest this content, and then they're going to produce their output from this content. So what's happening is we are essentially providing our small idea. We're then using a chat completion to create this summary and brief. And then we will use that summary and brief in the next step. So one thing that we need to do now is obviously add this back into our Airtable. So we're going to come back into Airtable. We're going to click Update Record. And then we're going to click on Content Machine YouTube. And then we're going to go Table as Inputs. The record ID will be the record ID from the first trigger. And then all that we're going to do is we're going to update the summary and brief with the choices, message, content, right? So if I just OK that, and then if we run this module, oh, sorry, I'm just going to, click choose where to start again, choose manually. Click number 5 again, run the whole thing. It's going to get that data from row number 5. It's going to process it with ChatGPT, and then you can see it's just added in the summary and brief here, which we can now see. So to create a high-value piece of content, increasing the conversion rates for SaaS landing page, crucial to focus on several best practices that companies already employ. Clear, compelling headline is paramount. X, Y, and Z. So there's a bunch of stuff in here that this can now use to then create the next piece of content from. So again, it's taking this tiny idea, fluffing it out into a brief. So think about our little AI agent here. So our ChatGPT widget, this one here is kind of like a mini agent that is going to take the small idea and then flesh it out into a brief. This is our brief creator. But what about if we wanted to create the summary from an audio note? Well, we can do that also as well, right? So let's go back over to Make. We're going to create new scenario. And we need to figure out how do we get the audio note in here first in a way that's like easy and off the cuff. So for me, I use a tool called Slack, which is a chat system. And I really like Slack because it enables me to just open up Slack on my phone. I've got a dedicated channel in Slack that I can just record an audio note into. And then from that channel, I can essentially take the audio note once it's published in there. I can automatically grab it via Make, and then I can download that file, drop it into Airtable here, and then I can then pass that file over to ChatGPT Whisper model to create the transcription, and then the transcription can be used to create the summary. Hope that makes sense. So we're just going to walk through that quickly now. In Make, we're going to go to set up a new trigger, which is Slack. And then we're going to watch a private channel message. Now, I've already got my workspace set up and added here. Again, if you don't have your Slack connected, you'll need to do that by clicking Add. So the input method is going to be via list. So I've just selected from this list here of the private channel audio note content ideas. I'm just going to click OK. I'm just going to choose manually because there is already some audio notes in there and you can see them all here. So I'm just going to grab the last one. I'm just going to OK that. And I'm just going to run this module only just so we can get that data, right? So within this data output, you can see in the files, click 1, there is a private download, right? So if we see this private download file, what we're going to do is we're going to add another Slack module and we're going to go here to download a file, all right? So the URL private download, we're going to select that from the first message. So we open up files here, click URL private download to add that in, click OK. Then we are just going to choose where to start again, choose manually. I'm just going to click on the top one. And then we're just going to run this once. So it's now watch for that message and now it's clicked on that to download it. Now we have the file here, right? So we have the data to use. Okay, so now we're going to add our ChatGPT module to actually get a transcription. So we're going to click create a transcription here. I'm going to use Whisper, and you can see it's already selected the download file, right, from the previous step. So if we don't need to add a prompt here, it knows what it needs to do. We're going to click on OK. And then again, I'm just going to come to test this out. I'm going to choose manually where to start. Click on OK. I'm going to grab this one and then we'll click run once. So it's going to grab the file, then it's going to download the file, and it's going to pass it to ChatGPT to produce the output. All right, so now we've got our output. If we click on this to view it, and then if we come down to the output, if we click on the text, now you can see this is the transcription. Right, so I just built a content system that takes small ideas via text input through a form or simply recording a quick audio clip into Slack to process those ideas and turn them into long form content X, Y, and Z, right? So now we've got that transcript. Then what we want to do is throw that transcript back into Airtable and create the new row. So we're going to click our content machine base. We're going to put our inputs table. And then we are going to put our transcription from this module here into that field. We're going to click OK. And then if we go one more time, choose where to start, choose manually, click OK, click run, and you can see it running the process. And then it's going to add that into our Airtable in just a second. You can see it now. So now we've got the transcription. I've just built a content system, X, Y, and Z. And then in a minute, what will happen is because that new that new row has been created, so I'm just going to turn that one on, come back out here, click save. Now we've got our two scenarios, but now our summarize inputs is also going to run in a minute as well. Okay, now it's not going to run straight away. You can see it's not triggered just because there's been a new row created. It's not triggered it straight away, and the reason being is because these triggers, you can see it's got this clock on it here. That means that it's triggering at regular intervals every 15 minutes. So just for the sake of speeding up this video, I'm just going to run this once. And you'll see that it will pick up the latest row, and then it's just created the summary here for us, right? So now it's got this summary that we can then use. So that's the inputs, right? I mean, we can obviously also hook up like manually uploading files into these, but for the sake of making this video less than an hour, ideally, I'm going to skip that for another day. But you can configure your own inputs to get the transcriptions, and then use our summarize inputs here, this small little one, to get this summary and brief. So the next thing that we want to do is process this. I just want to, at this point, give a shout out to Stephen Pope, because Stephen Pope's got an awesome YouTube channel if you want to check that one out. The inputs, processes, and outputs part of this structure of this database was inspired by him. And this next piece here, this processes part, is definitely inspired by his content system. I've just adjusted everything to my own liking. So if I click add another table at the top here, we're going to add our processes. And then we only really need a few fields here. First off, I'm just going to have the process name. Then we're going to have a process ID. So I'm going to change this to process ID. I'm going to change this to auto number again, so it just automatically creates a new ID every time we create a new process. I'm just going to get rid of assignee. And then the final thing here is going to be a text field that we call webhook. So it's just going to be single text. So the processes that I use specifically, and you can set this up however you want for yourself, but I like to create newsletters. So I'm going to put newsletter. I'm also going to create articles. So I'm going to create article, and then I'm going to put social posts, right? Because I like to also try and create social posts from these content ideas. And we're just going to leave it at those three, but you could do other things here as well. But for the sake of the video, we're just going to start with those three. So then if we go back over to our inputs, what we want to do is click add a new field. And we're now going to create a related field, right? And we're going to call this process. And then field type, I'm going to put link to another record. Then we're going to put processes. And then create this field. And it's going to ask us, do we want these other lookup fields to add? Do we want to add these also to this table? We don't, so we're just going to skip that. But now here, you can see that, all right, well, if I click on this, I can add a process. So if I'm going to add newsletter here, you can see it adds in newsletter, right? And we're going to use this essentially as buttons to process the inputs here. So I'm just going to get rid of the newsletter. And this is where the fancy automation gets built that has a bunch of different branches and stuff that we need. So if I just show you what we were talking about at the beginning of the call, it's this one. So this is where we start building this out. Okay, so let's come into our YouTube automations. I'm going to create a new scenario. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a webhook. Okay, so custom webhook, create a webhook. Now we're going to call this process content webhook. Leave IP restrictions blank, click save, and then it's going to give us a URL, which is the webhook address. So we're going to click copy address to clipboard, click OK. Then we're going to come back into our content machine. We're going to come back into processes. And in here, you can see the webhook field. It's going to be the same webhook for all of these because we're going to call the same automation no matter what happens. You can also see that there is an inputs field here. What I'm going to do is because if I link this process to a newsletter, if I come back over here, you can now see it's linked to record 4 in our inputs. We don't need to see this though, so I'm just going to hide that. Okay, so now what we actually want is for every time that we select one of these processes, so we want to, let's say on this one here, if we select article, what we want the system to do is to take this summary and brief and essentially send it to this webhook so that it can get received in make.com so that we can process it with our automations. Okay, so the way that we are going to do that is by using an automation. So if we now click into automations here, we're going to click trigger and we're going to say when a record is updated. Then we're going to select our table to inputs. We don't need to select a view. And then we can see here fields, right? So we want to have an update to the process field is going to fire this trigger, all right? So whenever that process field is updated, it's going to start this automation. Now the next thing that we want to do, and it gets a little bit techie here, is we're going to run a script. Now I'm not a coder at all. Again, shout out to Stephen Pope here. I used his script for this. So I'm just going to grab the script copy and paste it in here. Now I will also just let you pause this and get that if you need to, so that you can add that yourself. Also as well, don't forget guys that if you go to samwill.co/templates, you can download the template for this whole Airtable database and also the make process automations that we are building today. So don't forget that if you do want to grab those and just want to click install them. All right, so now we've added this in. One thing that we need to do here is we need to just input variables. So just follow me step by step here. We're going to create a record ID and make sure you pay attention to the case here. So you got record lower and then capital I and then lowercase d. And we're going to add the value here as the Airtable record ID. And we're going to add another variable, which is going to be our process ID here. So we're going to say process ID. And the value for that, if we scroll down here, is going to be... Actually, guys, one thing that I've just realized is we do need some extra fields in the database here. So what I'm just going to do is click Finish Editing just for a second. I'm going to come back over to Data. I'm going to click on, I'll do this later. And we do actually need to pull through those other fields here. So if we click onto Process and click Add Lookup Fields, then we're going to want the process ID and also the webhook, right? So we're going to add those two fields, but we can hide them. So we don't need to see it, but we do need them linked in this table. So if I come back over to automations in my script here, so for my process ID now I can select that as a value to use. So you can see process ID from process is going to be, you click on that and then you're going to click value, and then we're going to click on another input variable, and then we want the webhook URL, right? So webhook URL, and then I'm going to click on here, and then I'm going to add the webhook value. Okay. All right, I think we're good. So if we finish editing this, we've got all of our IDs down the side, all of our variables down the side. We can click on test action. It's going to say two steps will be tested. Click run test, and we're just going to grab one of these here. So I'm going to grab that last one, and then you can see it's running that, and then it's testing this script. Okay, so the script has an error. If I look at the execution log here, it's just because we didn't actually put a process in so that it can run again. So if I just quickly go back over to data, I'll do this later. In this one, I'm just going to put the process down here as newsletter for now. And then we're going to come back over to automations. We're going to click test automation again, select the record, select number 6, run the automation, and this time it should fire off fine because it actually has. Yeah, okay, cool. So now what we want to do is we're going to catch the information from Airtable that's sending over in this webhook. So if I click on webhooks, if I click on run once, so now this is waiting to receive that information. We're going to come back over, I'm going to start a new test, select record, number 6, run the automation. So that's running. And now you're going to see, okay, cool, it's just collected that information. So now we've got a record ID and a process ID, right? Because that's what was sent over in our variables. So the next step here is we're actually going to want to call Airtable. So we're going to want to go get record. We're going to want to select our base, content machine. Then we're going to select our inputs table. We're going to use our record ID that we just received, which is this one. We're going to pull that in. So click run once. We're going to start a new test, select record, number 6, run automation. So it's now running that test. So now it's sent over that information, and then using the ID that was sent over, it's gone and collected that record, right? So now you can see we've got access to all of the data. So we've got the transcription, and we've also got the summary, right? So now we can use this to process this information. So the first things first is we're going to add a router, because we're going to put this down 3 different paths depending on what the process is that we are, actually I'm just going to turn this off just for now. Depending on what the process is. So we've got articles, newsletters, or social posts. So that means we need to process this in 3 different ways. So we're going to create a splitter, a root splitter with the process that's split out by process ID. Okay, so if we come back over here, we're going to go to router. Oh. And you see it's given us 2 paths now. So first things first, we're actually going to get into adding this into an assistant on number 1. And I'm going to use my natural AI agents project. And I'm going to call the assistant that I've already set up. Okay, so now I've got a newsletter assistant. I'm going to use that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass it the summary brief. I'm just going to say, here is the brief. That's the prompt that we're giving this agent. And that's all that we need to do. Okay, I'm going to click OK. Now, this agent has been set up in OpenAI, so we're going to come on to that in a second. That it does have better prompts than just here's the brief, but we have to set that up in the assistant in OpenAI. So I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to set up our second assistant here. If I click to OpenAI, message and assistant, I'm going to select my AI agents project. And you can see again down here, I've already got an assistant set up for blog posts. So I'm going to call this blog assistant. This is our article one. And then I'm going to say, here is the brief. And then I'm going to put in the summary and brief. And then we're going to copy module, paste module, drag that close to that, and then it auto connects those 3. Then we're going to just auto align this by clicking this little magic button. And then in this third one here, we've got the same thing, but I'm going to change our assistant to our social posts assistant, right? So post assistant. Click on OK. So currently, if we just let this run right now, it's going to grab our data from Airtable, so our summary, and then it's going to put it down all 3 of these. And we obviously don't want that because it depends on what process we're running. So for this one here, we're running the newsletter process. So we only want it to hit the newsletter assistant up here, right? So what we're going to do is if we click on this little tool icon here, we can set up a filter. And we're going to say process ID. Process ID. So this one here. So you actually don't need to open that up. So you just got process ID equals to 1, because the process ID for our newsletter is 1, right? So if the data received has that process ID, it's going to go down this path. We'll go again. So condition process ID equals 2. That's going to be our blog. And then in here, we're going to say process ID equals 3, and that's going to be our social posts. And you can label these as well, right? So like newsletter, and then blog / article, and then social posts. Okay, so now it's just going to filter those out by depending on what it is. So if we test our process now, I'm going to click on run once. So it listens for our webhook. I'm going to go back into our automation. I'm just going to test it again. So I'm going to click on select a record. We're going to grab number 6 again. So we're going to click running, and then you'll see that it's going to fire off, and it knows that we've selected this as a newsletter process. So it's going to fire off to our newsletter assistant here. So you can see if I come back to our data, record number 6 was a newsletter process. So it's working that now. Now, one of the things that we want to do is after we've sent this information, we don't want to leave this process here. We want to reset it, because you might want to use the same content here for newsletters, articles, and social posts, right? So you want to be able to fire this multiple times. So the way to do that is just on our automation here. I'm just going to add an extra step, which is update record, and we're going to come back into our inputs. We're going to take the record ID that was used, and then we're going to change our field, which is process, back to nothing, right? So we just leave that blank. So now if we test that one more time on, I'm going to test it on number 5 here, then what we should see is that it's reset the process, right? So you can see we did have article in here, but now it's been reset to nothing. So now we could click on this and say social posts, article, newsletter, and then it's going to run the process, send the information off to here to process, and then from there it will do what it needs to do. So we run into an error here, which is as it was trying to process the newsletter, and essentially that is a rate limit reached. So you can run into rate limiting issues depending on what model you're using for OpenAI for your assistants. So let's just have a look at our newsletter assistant here, all right? And to create assistants, it's really straightforward. You need to have your OpenAI account. You need to go to, so you open that up at platform.openai.com, come to dashboard, and then you can click on your assistants here and then create a new assistant. And then you can enter the name, and then this is where you can enter your instructions, and then you can also enter the model that you want to use, right? So for the ones that I've been using recently here, I've been using the GPT 4.0 model, but it seems that that's struggling right now from a rate limiting perspective. So I'm just going to switch this to mini. I'll run this one more time. We're going to come back over to here. We're going to fire off our, we want to test our automation, select a record, number 6, run the automation, and then that's going to go through and message the assistant. Now we've changed it to the 4.0 mini model, the 4.0 mini model. So there's a bigger token window for this, so it should be able to work fine. But you'll have to play around with the assistants to make them work the way that you want, right? So now we can see that's worked. Now we've got our output, right? So we've got our results, we've got the content here, and this is going to be our newsletter. So this is the newsletter that it's just produced based on the input that we had in the summary. So you can see how this is really powerful, right? We can take these mini ideas, process them in this way, through these assistants. So let me talk to you about the assistants now, because this is really important. So as I mentioned, you come into here to set up your new assistants. You're going to want to enter a name like I've done previously. So like newsletter assistant. You're going to want to put your prompt into here. I don't know what prompt's going to work best for you. This is something that's probably out of the scope of this video and you'll have to figure out for yourself. But this is where the leverage points of this automation is. So figuring out the best way to use these assistants and the best types of prompts that you can use for these assistants is where this becomes really powerful. So you want to put your instructions in here. I'll give you an example of my newsletter one so that you can see. It's pretty straightforward. You're an expert copywriter that is responsible for creating new editions of my newsletter called Natural Progressions. Typo in there even. You should always reference the knowledge base, which we'll come on to a second, so that you understand the tone and style of the writing. Though I have a conversational style, I should not over-index on making the writing too casual. I want the copy to be approachable, conversational, but professional. Always try to use experiences and in-depth examples where possible to illustrate points. I'll provide you with a short brief for the project and for you to create your newsletter from. So now you can see that in our previous message here, all that we say is, here is the brief. And then we give them the brief from the previous Airtable record. You can see how it knows what to do with that because we've instructed it to do so here. Now the key thing here as well, which makes this really perform well, is this file search. So if you turn file search on, I'm just going to come back over to this new newsletter assistant. If I turn file search on, you can now add files to this. And what that means is that we can actually reference data. So let's say, for example, we have like a writing guide. So a style, like a writing style and tone guide, which is going to be really, really helpful. If we have any sort of like brand guidelines that we want to give the assistant, that's going to be really helpful. What I did personally is I uploaded 10 previous editions of my newsletter and I dropped all of those in here as well. So now it has like a writing guide, it has previous examples. So the more data that you can give it in this file storage here, the more data it can reference to give you a better output, right? So that's really important to this. And that's how I'm able to get pretty good output here, is because I've created a vector storage, so a data storage of all of the stuff that this newsletter assistant needs to be able to do a good job. That's really important, guys. I can't emphasize that enough. This is going to take experimentation. It took me hours to just play around with this and figure out what it needs and what it can do and what it can't. But my top tip for you is to, in the file search here, give it good examples of what you want it to do, and make sure that you are, if it's a writing job specifically, make sure that you have like a writing style guide that you can give it. And you might need to refine this stuff. It's not going to be perfect out of the gate. But I've got this to a point where this does a really good job of producing content for my newsletter now, and I have to edit it very little. And it's the same with the blog assistant. So we've got a separate vector storage for the blog assistant, and then a separate vector storage for the post assistant, right? So the prompts are different, and the files that it has access to are different, so that it can produce the right output. We're not just throwing our Airtable summary at just a one-off random ChatGPT prompt. We are sending it to like purpose-built assistants, and that's where the leverage is. I can't repeat that enough. So highly recommend that you spend time in assistants, making sure that these are good and proper and that they're right. So now that we've got our assistants hooked up and linked, if I come back over to our diagram, we obviously want to put our information back into the content database, but we also want our content approval process, right? So this is where I've actually chained assistants together. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is, so we're going to call another assistant. And again, what I've done here is in this assistants section, I've built a long form content review assistant, right? So newsletters and blogs, it has specific instructions on how to review the content. And then specifically it has instructions to rank the content out of 5 and provide feedback. Okay, so now I'm going to pass our creation assistant, I'm going to pass their output through our long form content review assistant. So if you see here, we're going to take the content from here. Sorry, so it's not the content text, it's the content text value. There we go. So we're going to take that and we're going to say, here is the content for review. And that's all that we're going to do. We're just going to call our long form review assistant. And then from there, one thing that it's going to do is it's going to output that review, the rating and the feedback as JSON. That's one of the things that's instructed for it to do. And the reason is because we want to be able to import this information back into Airtable very easily. So if I just run this quickly, so we're going to go run once, we're going to do a new test, select record, going to grab number 6 again, going to run the automation, it's going to catch that data, and then it's going to first off send our summary from our initial tiny idea to our newsletter creator. Our good friend here at Newsletter Creator Assistant is going to create the content, and then once that's been created, it's going to pass it to our long form content review agent. They're going to review it, and then their specific instructions are to output a rating and also feedback and nothing else. And we want this in a JSON format so that we can use it, right? So you can see down here the result, and it's put this as feedback, and then this is the feedback, and then it's given it a rating of 4. All right. And again, in our long form content review assistant, we have specific instructions on check for this criteria, the uniqueness of the concept, how on brand is the content. You should reference the writing style and tone analysis that's in the vectors database, the impact of the hook. Once you've done your analysis of the content, give it a rating out of 5. 1 meaning the post is trash, we should not post it. 5 being that the ranks high on all 3 criteria. You will output 2 items, a paragraph summary. You should output this in a rating. You should output this in JSON. So you can see the structure of that here, and then we've got a bunch of examples as well. So now we've got that. What we need to do is we just need to structure that information so that we can pass it back into Airtable. So we're going to go transform text to structured data. Again, we're going to use the mini, so the 4.0 mini. The text to parse will be the result of the last one. And then the prompt is just going to be extract the feedback and rating. Rating number from, that's it. Extract the feedback and rating number. That's all that we need to do. It kind of knows what it needs to do here. So add the data definition. We're going to have set a parameter. So the first one is going to be feedback. And then the description is going to be the feedback text. It's really already structured, so it kind of knows what it needs to do. So the instructions here is going to be minimal. It's going to want to be text. And then we're going to say, yes, it's required. And then we're going to add another data definition, which is rating. Description, this is the rating out of 5. Again, this is just going to be text. Actually, we're going to store this as a number because that's going to go into our rating field. So we're going to click yes. Click OK. Now we've got that set up. So again, we're going to just run this test once more. Give me a second here. We're going to need to add our process back in. So for newsletter, come back over to automation, click select record, number 6, run the automation. I'll speed this up. All right, so now you can see that we've got our output. So it's parsed this text and it's given us structured data. Now we've got a feedback and a rating. So now what we can do is feed that back into our content table in Airtable, which we don't actually have yet. So if we come back over to data, we're going to add our third table here, which is going to be content. So again, the first thing that we're going to do is change this to an ID. Have this as an auto number. Then we're going to have this as just the actual contents. This is where we'll store the content in this long text field. Then we're going to have a status. And this can be used however you want really, but like things for me, I'll put like approval needed. And then I would pretty much say published for now. We'll keep it simple. We'll have those two there, and then we can have our type. So it's going to be another single select drop down. We're going to have newsletter, article/blog, or we're going to have social post. All right, create field, and then we'll have our rating. And that's going to be, you can actually use the star rating here. So use one of those, maximum 5. And then we're going to have our feedback. And that's going to be a long text field. Then we're going to relate it back to the specific input. So we go link to another record input. That's fine. We don't need any of that stuff for this. Then we want a signal to say whether this has been posted or not. And I'm just going to use a checkbox for that. And then I also just like to have a last edited on here as well. All right, so now we're all set up, okay? Now what we want to do is we want to feed back our output from our scenario back into this new table. So we're going to go Airtable, we're going to create a record. So the content is going to be, the base is going to be content machine. The table is going to be our content table, which we've just created. The content itself is going to be from 2 steps back, right? So it's going to be this one here. We're going to grab the content, go into text, and then go value. Oh, sorry, my bad. It's actually not that one. It's the one previously, right? So it's this one here. It's the output of, the content assistant here, which is content, text, and then value. The status, I'm always going to put like, I'm just going to set this by default to approval needed. So we're going to hard code that in. So approval needed. Type in this instance is going to be newsletter. The rating is going to come from our last node here, which is number 4, which is this one here, 4. And then we've got our feedback is also going to come from our last node here as well. And we're also going to link it to our input record, right? So if we click on input, we're going to go record ID, and we're going to go all the way back to the Airtable record. We're going to grab the initial record ID from there, and that's going to link it to our initial input. And then here we go, guys. We're going to do one final run on this, and you can see this populate the whole thing. Come back into here. Let's set this up as newsletter. test this automation, click select record, number 6, run the automation. All right, so now you can see that path has run successfully and we now have our content output into our new table. So if we come back into data and let's go over to content. Now you can see our first piece of content that's been generated from our tiny idea. This is our first long form piece of content. It's rating us of 4, so it's ranked it with our content review agent here. We've got feedback, so it says that it's good. Now we can obviously, there's things that we can do with this feedback here. We could, for example, if the ranking was not good, we could actually take the feedback here and then loop that background into the initial agent and ask it to redo the content based on the feedback that the review agent has given us to improve it. We could do that. I'm not doing that for this one. But I mentioned right at the beginning of this, the real key thing that we can do here is self-improve this by signaling when we have posted a piece of content and then taking that content and then feeding it back into our assistant data store. So for example, our newsletter assistant here, which we've been using, I mentioned earlier, we've got the file storage, right? So what we can do is feed any good content that we've posted back into that file storage so it has more data to use as an example to create its future content from. So I'm just going to show you how to do that, and then we'll call this video a day here because it's getting really long, longer than I expected. But hopefully you can see how you can chain these assistants together here. And we could do the same for the social media assistant here. Same with the blog assistant. The blog assistant's pretty much the same as this one. The social media assistant is slightly different. Maybe I'll create a second video, a follow-up video on that. If you want that, let me know, follow up below. And I'll actually, either way, in the template, I'll actually give you the full template with all the social media assistants and stuff like that in it as well. So with the social media chain of assistants in it as well. One thing that you won't get in the templates is the assistants, right? You have to set the assistants up yourself. And I would highly recommend doing so because it's really important that you sort of understand how the assistants work, and because that's going to show you how to get the best out of them. But yeah, let's wrap this video up with this final automation here, which is the cherry on the cake. So what we want to happen is if I've taken this content and I've published it, I'm going to move the status to published, which to be honest means we don't really even need this little posted field here. So let's just get rid of that. So we're going to move the status to published. And then what we want is once that status gets updated, we're going to trigger a new automation, which is going to update the storage. So let's go back here, save our changes. Make is super dangerous to work with, by the way, guys. Make sure that you save your changes along the way. I completely always forget. We're just going to call this one Content Assistant YT. I always forget to save my changes, and then you back out and then it prompts you to resave. But yeah, continue, make sure you save along the way. To do that, you just click this button down here, which helps you save. So one thing that I need to do is remember to do that more often because I've lost stuff halfway through, which has been painful. So anyway, we got this Content Assistants one here. Let's go back to our scenarios. I'm going to go into YouTube Automations, create one more. Now what we want is a webhook. So we want to catch another webhook. So I'm going to create a new webhook. I'm going to call this good content vector update. So we're going to copy this address to the clipboard, and we're actually going to come back into our automations. We're going to create a new automation here. Okay. Create a new automation. This one is going to be send good posts to vector storage. This one is just process content. So the trigger is going to be when a record is updated. It's going to be the content. Then the field is going to be the status. And then we're going to want to add an extra piece of logic here. So conditional logic, when status is published, then we're going to run a script. And again, I'm just going to copy and paste the script here from my previous automation. So let me just grab that. But all that we're doing here is we're only sending one parameter through this time, which is the record ID. That's all that we need. So input variable is going to be record ID. And then that's going to be our Airtable record ID. And then we're also going to send a webhook URL. And this time we're just going to actually use this URL here. So we're going to grab that from the clipboard, come back over, we're just going to hard code that in, paste it in. Now I'm just going to click on OK. It's going to run once, and we're going to test it. We're going to send this over. Okay, now that's run. We've got the webhook here. So now we can see we've got a record ID. So that's really good because that means we can just quickly go in and get a record from Airtable. Come into our base. Come into our content table now, and then we're just going to plug in our record ID just to grab all that information from that record. So let's run that so that we can use the data. Let's retest. Now we've got our Airtable data. All right. So we've got our content and then everything else as well. So now what we're going to want to do is create a router, because we're going to want to split this depending on what the content type is. So the top one we're going to use for newsletters, middle one for blogs, and then bottom one for social posts again. So in the top one, what we want to do is actually first off create a Google Doc. We can't just throw the Airtable data straight at the vector database, because the vector database needs to actually ingest a .txt file, all right? It can't just take the information from our previous Airtable record, and you can't just throw it at the database. It needs to ingest a file. So we need to create a file, then download it as a txt file, and then we can use that file to upload to the vector database. So we're going to do that now. We're going to create a document, and we're going to just call this newsletter and last edited, so we can see that it's a newsletter, and then when the content was last updated. We're going to give the content here, and then you select wherever you want. For now, I'm just going to put this into my content engine. In here, you would want to create you want to create your own file structure that works for you, where you can store all of these successful posts, just so that you've got reference to them on your drive as well. And they're tiny files, so they don't take up any space really if they're just text files. I'm just going to put it into my content engine one for now. So we're going to create that document. Don't know why that's there. Let's go like this. And then what we're then going to do is download that document. So what we'll do is we'll actually click on map here, and then we'll pull the document ID from the one that we just created. And then all that we want to do is download it as a plain text file, right? So then we're going to create a ChatGPT module. And what we're going to do is we're going to upload a file. So again, this isn't throwing it straight at the assistant right now. You are taking the file and you're uploading it just to your general OpenAI workspace. So I'm going to do that for the purpose of assistance. And then what you're able to do, value is not empty. Okay, so and then what you're able to do is use that uploaded file to add that to your vector data store. Okay, so you can see that here. Okay, so on this module, what we're going to do is we're just going to click the file IDs to map. We're going to take the file ID from the last node here, and then we're going to choose whichever the assistant is that we want to update the storage for. So in this case, we wanted to update the newsletter assistant because it's the newsletter assistant that we've been using here, right? So we're going to click on OK, and then essentially, if we run this one more time, so I'm going to click run once, and then we're going to test our automation here. It's going to run. It's going to create our Google Doc. It's going to download our Google Doc, it's going to upload it, and then it's going to upload it again to the vector storage. And then if I come over to my assistant, my newsletter assistant, and if I go to my vector storage, you can see it's just uploaded this new file here. So now we have a way to take the content from a tiny idea, process it in whichever way that we want, collect the content in the database, have it ranked then by our approval agent, and then when we manually publish and we update the content, we can then run this script, which is going to trigger our make automation so that we can send that data back into the to the creation assistant. So many assistants going on here, it's kind of hard to remember which one's which, right? So we've got our content processing assistant. So our newsletter content processing assistant is going to get updated, and he's next time that we want to create a newsletter, he's going to have more content to use to create a better output. And again, guys, don't forget, if you do want these automations, check the link in the description below. The templates will be in there with a video on how you can just import these scenarios. So to wrap this one up, guys, you would just need to finish off the different paths here that you want to do. You can use the templates to do that, plug in your assistants, and away you go. And then just turn everything on, and yeah, start off in your inputs. Have your, put your ideas into copy here, or use your Slack audio notes to get a transcription, and then this is going to run in the background to create your content, and then it's going to run in the background to create your summary and brief, and then you can process your summary and briefs into different pieces of content. I probably recommend updating it in here first, so that you have the final output. Then you can publish the content, and then once you select the status publish, it's going to reinforce your agent, and away you go. You've got a self-improving content automation machine. Apologies for the super long video, guys, but hopefully that was helpful. It showed you a few sort of ideas and things that you can do with the AI assistants as part of your process, as part of your content process. For me, I just think they're massively important in the future, and they're going to be big leverage points for every business owner. So I think it's important that we kind of spend some time wrestling with these now and get really used to how they're going to work, because the models are going to keep improving. So if you've liked this video, if you've got some value out of it, please do like and subscribe. That would be really meaningful for me. I'm trying to increase the reach of this channel, and I want to create more awesome videos like this one and help you guys in the future. So any questions or any blockers on any of this, or any ideas that you want to run by me, just throw them in the comments and I'll jump in and help out where I can. And don't forget, you can download the make.com and Airtable database templates in the description below to help get you started. All right, guys, see you in the next one.